Hello and welcome back to the Fight and Talk 2 podcast with myself, Connor, Mr. Fight and Talk. We have Prath and George, the co-host of the show. What a night. What a night it was. What a card to start the year. What a main card it was. So many upsets on the early start of the main card. The excitement is just going absolutely crazy. The whole of social media was blowing up last night. Obviously, it was on ABC in America. I'm still in awe of the performance that Max put on. Boys, tell me, what are your thoughts? George?
Well, I'll tell you something. Max Holloway, I'm going to congratulate him right now. He's won Fight of the Year and he's won Round of the Year. And it's fair, I've got to give it to Kattar, I suppose, as well. But it was absolutely incredible. I've never, in all the time I've been watching the UFC, mixed martial arts, I've never seen a fight quite like it. The pressure, the striking, the ferocity of it, everything from Max Holloway was just, it was incredible, to be honest. And it was just jaw-dropping, to be honest. You just sat there and were like, you just couldn't believe what was going on. But one thing I want to say is, in terms of Calvin Kattar is, man, that guy can take a punch. That guy's made of steel, because I was staggered he was still standing after the fourth round. I couldn't believe it, to be honest. And the only other thing I want to mention about Calvin Kattar is, maybe this is a conversation for another time, but I think there could have been a serious question about whether it would have been kind to have thrown the towel in at some point. He was taking a lot of damage, and perhaps maybe for the longevity of his own self, it would have been kind to have said, like, that's enough. We saw with kind of Tony Ferguson recently, he took all that damage against Gaethje, came back in his next fight and did not look the same person. And I'm worried that potentially, it might not happen, but maybe Kattar might not be the same guy again after taking such damage. But
Absolutely.
Max Holloway, absolutely insane. The best performance I've ever seen inside an octagon. I just, even now, sort of almost a day later, I struggle to think of the words to just praise what is just the most unbelievable performance. So, yeah. Oh, and lastly, before I let someone else have a go on it, that bit in the fifth round where he's talking to Daniel Cormier and he's saying he's the best boxer in the UFC, whilst he lands that jab to the face on Kattar and then ducks and weaves and slips and dips out of 5 punches, I think it was, from Kattar, was one of the best moments I've seen inside an octagon as well. So, yeah, Max Holloway, unbelievable performance. And I think as well, if he goes on now, we'll talk about this later on, if he goes on to beat Volkanovski potentially in a third fight with them, I think he's already a hands down contender to be Fighter of the Year as well if he goes and does that. So we'll see. But yeah, incredible main event, and what a start to the year! Unbelievable.
Yeah, completely. And it wasn't just the typical boxing that we were seeing from Max either. He was jumping in and hitting Kattar with the side kick as well, his lead leg, just to break him off that rhythm. So Kattar, you could tell as soon as the ref clapped to get him started, it was just non-stop from Max. And we don't usually see Max do that. Max is usually a later fighter. He usually comes out a little bit slower, finds his distance, picks his shots and stuff. But he just came out like a bull in a china shop. And unfortunately for Kattar, he was the china shop and Max was just completely tearing it up. Prath, what did you see?
Oh, man. An incredible fight. Definitely one of the best fights I've ever seen live. And I think there's a big discussion going on at the moment around whether we would call it the fight of the year or the performance of the year. And I'm going to just lean a little bit into the performance of the year side of things. Just from a volume standpoint, easily one of the best fighters of all time. And this is one of the things that I was talking about before, like the juxtaposition of having 2 stand-up fighters, one who fights mostly in a power setting, and one who fights mostly in a predominantly in a pace setting. And Max Holloway was just a trademark Max Holloway performance. And I think I will say that for me, the Brian Ortega performance was one of the ones that will really stand out for me in the lexicon of Max Holloway's career. But what we saw last night was hands down just one of the most incredible singular performances you'll see in a fight. The body shots, the spinning attacks, and one of the things that you mentioned, Connor, that I was going to mention as well, is those front leg side kicks, John Jones style, that he was throwing a lot, which he doesn't regularly throw a lot. the spinning attacks, which he throws one or two, but he doesn't really throw like more than 2 or 3 in a fight. He threw maybe 6 or 7 spinning attacks in this one. And so the diversity of the attack, up, down, leg kicks, body shots, it was sublime to watch. And I actually felt like privileged to sit here and watch someone put his craft on the table and just show the world like, hey, you guys counted me out, Roy Jones Jr. style. You must have forgot, because he took, and I think the way he handled the loss against Volkanovski, I think was like incredible, because he could have been absolutely, he could have been going beside himself with, the decision, the judges. And he just looked at that entire situation and just went, it is what it is. Classic Max Holloway, it is what it is. And he's able to move on and just show the world, like, you can never, ever count on Max Holloway. And again, the same thing that we're going to talk about with Kattar is his chin. Oh my God. Like, I think that might be top 5 chins I've ever seen. And I one of the things that I talked about last week when I was breaking down the Condit Brown fight was that that aged chin from going through those wars, the Robbie Lawler fights and things of that nature. I think that was definitely Calvin Kattar leaving a piece of himself in that octagon, unfortunately, as much as I absolutely love him. And I think his respect level from everybody else is kind of the same thing with Tony Ferguson. When you see Tony Ferguson go through those wars, absolute chaos, and he comes out the other side and he's either the victor or the loser, you give him so much respect for going through the chaos. And I think Calvin Kattar is now, he's going to be given that violent title for the featherweight division, and you're going to hang on to that for a little bit, because I feel like he's got some crazy fights coming up, and I'm really interested to see how he's going to bounce back from this. One of his first losses in a while, it's going to be interesting to see, but I think he's got all the tools capable for being in the top echelon of the division, and I think he's going to be a mainstay in that featherweight division, both of them.
Absolutely.
Max is still under 30 as well, which is the craziest part of this entire situation. He is under 30 years old. He is a former champion, under 30 years old, still getting better every single fight.
Absolutely. He's a former champion and a future champion as well, as we saw from his performance last night. For me, I was so excited. I was bouncing around on the chair. I was stood up. You saw Dan Hardy in the corner doing the commentary, and he was a true fan. You could not take him away from being such a huge fan of fighting. His analysis of the fight beforehand, during the fight, he was shadow boxing in the corner as well. And he was literally like every fight fan was doing at home. I was stood up. I was beside myself. Honestly, it was just so exciting, and for me, that exactly as George said, that was one of the best fights I've seen in years. Although it may have been one-sided, it was the best performance and it was the best fight because it went the distance. I feel like I was in my head, I was comparing it to the Jorge versus Nate Diaz fight, where if he hadn't got that cut early on, it would have been one-sided. The whole fight was one-sided building up to that point, but if he hadn't had the cut above his eye, it would have continued. It would have been an absolute scrap, but you could see that Jorge was clearly dominating the fight, and I felt like, it could have been stopped last night. If Max had brought them elbows down just a little bit more and caught him on the top of the head, the top of the forehead, it would have been over. The doctors would have stopped it. And from a fan point of view, we would have been upset because we could have seen more damage. And, there's a lot of just bleed people out there. But, it was Kattar's ability to also dodge and roll and duck under so many of the shots, because Max was throwing everything and the kitchen sink at him. He was shelling up, and he did dodge a big amount of the shots as well. I think so. We have to give absolute props to Kattar for taking so much damage, but also for dodging so much damage. He could have been put out very early on. And also the mindset of Max to think, after the third round, this guy is not leaving this octagon. He is not coming out of here. So he was throwing absolutely everything at the kitchen sink, and Kate was just stood in front of him. I bet he was just, analyzing in his head what he was going to do each round and thinking, I can't get this guy out of here. I've clearly won the fight, but what do I have to do to get him out? I think the only way he could have got him out was to take a gun in there, Prath, tell me.
He had a cut on his head on like the end of the second or third round as well. And I actually thought, DC was saying on commentary that that would be something that they needed to work on. So credit to his corner for getting that swelling down and stemming that bleed a little bit, because that did look and I think it was he caught an elbow in that exchange. He took like 7 elbows in every exchange. I'm still in disbelief. I was screaming, getting up from my chair, screaming at my TV, just how incredible this was. And there's very few fights that have made me do that. Condit Lawler 5th round that has made me do that. And I just felt like that was the 5th round of that fight in every round.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And as we spoke about in last week's show, and when we did a little breakdown, obviously I went Kattar. It didn't turn out that way. I was trying to go for the underdog. I was trying to pick the unpopular pick, but you guys got it spot on. And we also talk about Kattar's nose as well, which was clearly broken very, very early on in the fight. So props to him. You could see he had his mouth open. He was breathing very heavily because he did not have the use of his nose as well. But it just takes us to a point now where we're going to obviously see Max versus Volk again, if Volk can beat Ortega in the coming months. But then where does that leave us? Who's the first, second, third? Is there anyone else in the division coming through? George, where do you see this division going for the rest of the year?
Well, I mean, obviously we're going to have Volk against Ortega. I think it's February the 13th. I think that one is happening, is it? So that'll get done. I guess if Volk comes through that, it will be Holloway. If Ortega comes through it, it'll probably be Holloway, probably, I would presume. For Calvin Kattar, I was thinking today, like, where he might be able to go. I thought maybe Yair Rodriguez might be a potential one. Once he's back from his ban, it'll probably give Kattar enough time to kind of regroup and go again. That might be a great fight. Obviously, there is Korean Zombie, who needs a win after losing to Ortega last time out. And then there's Zabit, who seems to be a bit of a dark horse in all of this, doesn't seem to get around too much, but could be a problem potentially. So who knows? I personally think like Max and Volk will go again. I think, I'm not just saying this after last night, I do genuinely believe Holloway will win that fight. And I think he won the second fight between them. I think he'll win this one. And I think he'll reign supreme this year. Personally, I think he'll end the year as champion of that division. But if I had to guess for a dark horse, I guess I'd have to go for Zabit, because he's kind of an unknown quantity still, even though he's 18-1 in his professional career. But he seems to be the kind of guy that everyone doesn't know a lot about. His performance against Kattar was pretty impressive, but he needs another fight. Korean Zombie would be great. Him against Korean Zombie, I'll be up for that. That'd be pretty cool.
I'd love to see Yair versus Zombie.
Mm-hmm.
No, sorry, Yair versus Zabit.
Yair versus Zabit, another one. If they want to come back and they want to make Zabit wait, then yeah, for sure that would be great as well. But if I'm having to think about it as a whole picture, I just see Max reigning this, to be honest. I think we're talking about the greatest featherweight of all time.
But if we look at the time scale in which these fights are going to get done, so we've got Ortega versus Volk in February, as you said, and then that leaves 3 or 4 months that these guys are going to have off, where we have medical suspensions. But if someone gets badly banged up in that fight, we're not seeing anyone fight for a belt until the end of the year. And then if so, it holds up the division so much, having two people that are so good at their craft. And obviously Ortega coming back off of a 2-year stint off due to injuries and stuff, coming back, having a fantastic performance against Korean Zombie. That we were speaking about the lightweight division being, stacked, but this division is just as tight. There may not be as many people in contention, but the people that are in contention for those top 3-4 spots are very, very good. Very, very good.
I think the most important thing after Volkanovski and Ortega fight, I think it's really important that Dana gets Zabit in the octagon, like gets him a fight. So at that point, then we know where he stands potentially. Because after Volkanovski Ortega, obviously Holloway will have it. But if Zabit goes away and wins 1 or 2 fights, then he's the next guy in line. So there are fights to be had that will help see the division through. But you're right, the fight for the title after Volkanovski Ortega probably won't be until October, November, perhaps even December, probably.
That's one of the unfortunate things we were talking about, is Volkanovski unfortunately taking very little fights as the champion over the year period. And I think that's really going to affect this situation here, especially if he takes damage against Brian Ortega. And I think that's going to be a fight where both guys are going to be quite battered. And so we'll see what happens in that side of things. But like, I think the top of the division here is, I want to go back to what Volkanovski said kind of like last year. He was saying that he wanted to just see the guys fight. And I think that's so true. When you look at the top of the division, not a lot of these guys are getting matched up against each other. And I'd love to see that. You know, Yair Rodriguez versus Zabit is an incredible fight. And that is a fight that I think like martial arts fans across the world will absolutely pine over. So that can be booked anywhere. It's just a matter of actually booking it. And one of the things I was noting on the desk yesterday after Max had won his fight on the when he was talking to Paul Felder and the other guys at the desk is that they were kind of mentioning Zabit's name there. And I think if Volkanovski takes this fight against Ortega and wins, he will take some time off. And does Max Holloway want to wait in that time? Does he not want to take another fight? And I think Zabit is a great fight to match him up against, just in the way that the rankings are kind of stacked at the moment, and the way it is. He's kind of faced off against most of these other guys, apart from Chan Sung Jung. I would love to see Holloway versus Zabit, but I think at the end of the day, these guys are all going to fight each other one way or the other, and I think that's the beauty of the UFC against boxing, is that all these guys will end up getting matched up. So let's see where the dice fall, and let's see, injuries. That's one thing as well that I've never really been able to count on these fights making it all the way through because of injury. Now we've got COVID as a thing, PEDs. You never know what happens, and every day is a new day. So we'll see how it goes with this, but Max is definitely, and I agree, George, I think Max is going to be the standout featherweight of this year, despite being the standout featherweight of most years. I'm still in awe. I'm still in awe. I've no words to sum up just how I feel about it, but it was incredible.
Absolutely. And I know all three of us, actually, we were obviously speaking last night when we were watching the fights. I was, staying very active on social media as well and watching everyone's thoughts on the fights. And it was just a masterpiece. We could literally spend an entire episode on that fight because there is just so many ways we could break it down and we could look at it. But it was just fantastic from every point of view, whether you are a casual fan. If you were a casual fan watching that, you'd think, wow, this is everything I want it to be. If you were a boxing fan watching that, you'd think, I don't want to watch boxing anymore. I want to be switching over and I want to be watching every single one of Max Holloway's fights, but obviously we did have a lot of fights before that and we had some massive upsets as well. Ponzinibbio, I'm going to start off with this guy who's coming in with a massive amount of hype. He had 2 years off and everyone thought he was going to come in and he was going to steamroll him. Everyone thought it was, Li Jingliang was going to take the L during this fight, but he came out there and Ponzinibbio just didn't seem to warm up. He didn't seem to shake off his ring rust, but Li Jingliang just completely went through him. George, what did you see?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, Ponzinibbio looked really rusty, didn't he? He looked almost uncomfortable in there at times. The kind of hand movements and the feints from Li Jingliang was definitely putting him off. Like, it was him trying to get into that kind of ballpark area where he could try and have some kind of activity with Li was just not happening. And he just couldn't find a way in. And so, like I said on the last episode, I thought Li had that kind of heavy punching power that would potentially, in the early stages of the fight, cause Ponzinibbio a problem simply because he'd been out for so long, and it came true. He caught him with that left hook, and it was good night. It was good night Vienna. Mm-hmm. And I think when I think back on it now, like, I think all the talk, and it was the same from myself, that Ponzinibbio needs to just get in there, see himself through. He'll come out the victor in this. Maybe we're really downplaying like Li here. Like, maybe this guy's a serious contender. Like, he's won. I think now it's 9 of the last 11. He's experienced. He's tough. He can hit hard. Like, and he's got the mental capacity to go in there with some pretty big names and find a way to get the job done. Clearly, this was a huge victory for him. So perhaps maybe more than thinking about where this leaves Ponzinibbio, where does this leave Li now? Like, where does he move forward this year? I was saying before on the last episode that maybe once Ponzinibbio gets through this, fights with Tyron Woodley or Damian Maia might come to pass. Maybe those fights will now come to pass for Li Jingliang. I mean, who knows? But I was really impressed with him. I thought he was fantastic for the 4 minutes and whatever seconds it lasted. And yeah, fair play to him. Ponzinibbio's got Ponzi needs to go away now. I feel like Ponzi needs to go away, get a fight with a lesser opponent, and just get a win on the board. Just get back in, get a win on the board, and then figure out how you work your way back up. I think, it's no, he's been out for 2 years, so it happens, doesn't it? But I think going in against a guy with so much experience, who's clearly quite dangerous, it backfired on them quite badly. And but fair play to Lee, great knockout, great victory.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a fantastic performance from him as well. Obviously, Ponzinibbio didn't get to warm up a little bit, but Li Jingliang just went straight through him. And obviously, that wasn't the only upset we saw from a betting view as well. It was the Buckley. It was, whether he is on the receiving end or the delivering end of an absolute highlight reel knockout. Prath, what did you see, man? It was crazy. I was sat there thinking, right, he's not doing too well here. And then he was he's quite a short guy anyway. He's very stocky. He's very well built. But he's quite short. I think he's 5'10".
Yeah.
And he was almost making himself 4.5 foot. He was ducking down so much that when I think he was worried with that kick, it was just it could have been a body kick, and he was just dipping down so much.
I think he was worried about Alessio's wrestling. I think Alessio, one of his stronger points is his wrestling. And I think, having that low stance to be able to get the underhooks and get yourself off of that wrestling is kind of one of the key things he was probably worried about so much there. And how would you expect Alessio to throw a head kick? He's, again, one of those guys that's predominantly a wrestler. He doesn't throw a huge amount of head kicks. So I think it must have caught him by surprise. And boy, it did.
It was a massive shock to everyone who, like myself, put an accumulator on the whole card thinking he was going to take the L hit. Thinking he was going to take the W, sorry. And then he didn't. He just really didn't, And it wasn't just it wasn't like a foot to the head. It was like shin to the temple. There was no way he was getting up from that. It was a great stoppage as well. And it was great because we didn't see a lot of knockouts on the undercard either. On the prelims, there were a few fights that just, it didn't really excite me too much. But Jocelyn Edwards, she came out and she looked very, very good against Wu Yinan. She looked very good. She wasn't throwing massive power, but she was catching well, and she was playing on the ground as well. Prath, you're going to, get into a little bit about the transitions on the ground, but that was a fantastic performance from me. And I think she's definitely one to watch.
She was a scrappy grappler, and I think that's one of those kind of styles that people really gravitate to. Someone that doesn't just sit in one position, is able to take the back, to go to the side, to go to the armbar position, spiderweb, and go to mount, start raining down. And you know what? For both of them as well, I think they were both doing incredible transitions, reversing each other. There were points where she was in mount and she was able to spin into the guard and then go back to kind of like her being in the other person's guard. And so I think both of them really, really stood out for me in terms of like the undercard and the skill level as well. For me, they was definitely at the top of that prelim card, and you can tell from a skill perspective. Unfortunately, most of the undercard for me, kind of, I'll agree with you, kind of didn't really do anything for me. There were some okay scraps. I think obviously Junior Taffa and Carlos Felipe is going to be one that we touch on. The other. So Junior Taffa and Carlos Felipe being an incredible fight that was on the prelims. Not much of the other card really stood out to me. So just what a slugfest between the two. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on both your guys' thoughts on that when they went head to head and they were just kind of swinging the hooks at each other.
It was a real rock'em sock'em, and I said a little bit last week about not really appreciating fighters that are coming in and having to cut weight to make 265. If they were a little bit lighter and a little bit, swifter and able to move a little bit better around the octagon, maybe they would have had a better performance. But I do feel that Taffa was definitely putting on a better performance the majority of the fight. I think it was, it was definitely going to be a 55-45 kind of thing. But Felipe obviously got the W, is why you should not leave it to the judges. They are going to see what they want to see, and they may not see what you feel like you put in. But we had some fantastic fights, nevertheless, on the main card. And Prath, you're actually going to break down the Todorovic fight, which I was so excited about for the first 2.5 minutes, and then obviously it went massively downhill from there. Prath, give me your thoughts, man.
Yeah, I'd love to just give an honorable mention to the Condit Brown fight that I broke down last week. What, two warriors to just go to absolute battle, and you could just tell that they were giving absolutely everything in there. So just massive shout out to the Natural Born Killer and the Immortal. They will just go down in forever as history as the two of the most violent gentlemen in that welterweight division. But yeah, the fight that really stood out to me that I really enjoyed was the Punahele Soriano versus Dusko Todorovic fight. And when I went into this fight, I didn't know a super huge amount of information about the two. I kind of went as they were kind of walking out, I was looking at some of their records and stuff, and they're actually both off of the same season of Dana White's Contender Series, coming off of finishes in their last fight. Soriano coming off of a win over Oscar Pachota, which was a KO. It was a beautiful one, folded him up. And Todorovic came with a TKO, just like a kind of mounted ground and pound over Dequan Townsend. And so when they come in, this is kind of their proving ground. They came off of the Contender Series. They both had a KO. They're both undefeated. The O has got to go, as the phrase always goes. And what you could kind of see early on in the fight was that Puna was trying to get his range. He was trying to hit him with, like, you could tell that his left hand was the dynamite killer, and he was trying to land that all night. He was started off by throwing kind of looping shots, and they weren't really kind of reaching him. They were hitting the arms mostly. And as soon as he was able to straighten out that left hand, he was landing it over and over and over again, dropping him over and over and over again. Literally 3 times he dropped him, once straight down, once against the cage, and then another time where he essentially just hit him and then just pushed him over. And just, I think, dynamite in that guy's left hand. He's going to be one of those guys now that really needs to go into that upper echelon of that division and maybe start to give him those kind of top 15 guys. Undefeated, he looks the part. I think he's going to be, he speaks very eloquently for someone that just kind of went through a cage fight, and had the wits about him to kind of give his message and stuff. So I really enjoyed that fight. And he really proved himself as a killer. And I think consecutive KO wins are what really win those fans over, those diehard fans, when you see those guys stack up those 2, 3, 4 KOs back to back to back. So let's hope that he's able to kind of keep that train going. Let's see who we can kind of match him up against. I don't have the middleweight division in front of me right now, but I'd love to see him maybe hit a 12 to 15 ranked middleweight, and let's start moving these guys up. I think one of the things that the UFC at the moment are really, I wouldn't say lacking in, but just really need more of those stars. And as quickly as we can start really promoting these guys, and he's a young guy as well, so he's got a very bright future ahead of him. I think Todorovic as well, unfortunate loss for him, but I think he got wrong with a shot, and he showed some really good grappling in a couple little sequences. So, credit where credit's due. Tough guy, both of them tough, but Soriano, man, he's going to be one to look out for this year. And I also just like, how gutted am I for Buckley, man? He was going to be my kind of breakout star of this year coming up. So I'm going to go with Chimaev as my fighter to look out for, if you didn't already know.
Absolutely, man. And Todorovic, I feel like he had a good game plan, but the game plan was a very newcomer game plan. If I can just keep leaning back, I'm going to miss these looping shots, which obviously worked when they were looping. Yeah. But exactly like you say, man, as soon as Soriano started to straighten those shots up, you can only lean back so far before you will get caught on the end of something, His
explosion was incredible. His explosion into the right hand. He like the jab from the right hand, that was kind of the pace setter for him. And then it's like he flew halfway across the octagon and hit him with the left hand. And Todorovic had no answer to it. And just felt, I think he obviously got overwhelmed with those first couple ones that dropped him, and just unable to recover, man. So massive shout out to Punahele Soriano.
That's it. These names just get harder. They just get harder and harder and harder, and so many people get so much stick for not saying them right. But we're all from, MMA fans, we're from all over the world. We all have different accents on these names, and until you actually hear them say their own name, you're only guessing. I remember I was watching an old Ngannou fight. I think it was one of his first or second fights in the UFC, and Rogan was calling him Ngannou. He just didn't know how to say his name, and it's just one of them things. We all just have to have to hit and hope and really just try our best, you know. But yeah, absolutely fantastic fight by both of those guys, and it's just unfortunate that Todorovic didn't have anything to give back to him, you know. But George, what was your fight of the night? What one are you going to break down for me, bud?
Oh, it's I've oh Christ, it's hard, isn't it? What I would say is that it was what a result for ABC. You know, first time kind of this type, combat sport was kind of back on ABC. You know, three knockouts on the main card and the Max Holloway fight. And to be fair, the Condit Brown fight as well was more than good. You know, I reckon they'll be phoning up Dana White every week saying, "Can we have a card on ABC?" If it's going to be like that. It's hard though. Like, I mean, Buckley, that was just crazy. Like that was just so out of the blue. You just couldn't believe it. The Puna Harley one was great as well. I mean, that guy, God, he throws bombs, doesn't he? Like, and those Hawaiians, man, they're built tough.
I just think the last little while, we've just seen this real upsurgence of these Hawaiians coming in these, sometimes like most of the guys you see are coming in those lighter divisions, the flyweights, the bantamweights, and the featherweights. But to see like a big like Brad Tavares and guys like Soriano here that are able to really like fly the flag for those bigger weight classes. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, you said ABC, obviously it was a home run for them. And I remember going back and watching the first Fox show, which had Cain Velasquez versus JDS, and that had so much anticipation, and that just ended up lasting 30 seconds. So it was definitely like a Bonner Griffin moment where you want to tune in to watch that. And I think it was a home run for them for that to be the particular first fight. We just knew that both guys would be able to deliver so hard. So I'm happy that it delivered, and I'm happy it delivered for the UFC, and hopefully more, more things for them.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, but I just think overall, if I had to go for a fight tonight, I'm going to stick with Lee over Ponzinibbio. I'm gonna say that guy's become a genuine welterweight contender. Welterweight contender. I think he's the real deal.
No, absolutely, man. And obviously, we were all so excited, not only for the fights, but also because we had Dana White coming on the show. And Dana White was going to give us a little bit of information about what was going on with Khabib, what was going on with the lightweight division, and how it played out for next week's fights as well. But it was a massive kind of anti-climax for so many people, because he was just, if Khabib finds something exciting next week, then he might come back. He thought Oliveira did very well. He might come back. He might not. If he doesn't see anything good, he might not come back. It was just, we know no more now than we did last week, you know. Boys, what was your take on it? George?
This is ridiculous, because the first thing that came out of Dana White's mouth was Khabib doesn't want to hold up the division. But he's holding up the division, isn't he? Like, we're no further forward than we were back in October when he retired. Like, he's just going to sit around. It's basically now Khabib's Contender Series, isn't it? Like, he's just going to do whatever he wants. He'll tell Dana White who he wants to fight, and then Dana White will make it happen. Like, it's ridiculous. I just don't, I was hoping that he would vacate the title and then figure out what he was going to do. The fact that he's going to keep hold of it, knowing that he genuinely only has one more fight as well. So there's just, there's no need to almost keep hold of it in a way. I just don't get it, man. It was such an anticlimax. They built it up. It's going to be on ABC prime time. It's just huge. It's going to affect Dustin and Conor. It's going to affect Hooker and Chandler. And it's like, oh my God, like, this is going to be for a title, isn't it? Like, this is what's going to happen. And he's like, oh yeah, Khabib might come back. He's going to take a look at the fighters next weekend, and he's going to, and then he'll let me know. He'll let me know if he's going to come back. It's like, what? That's just so rubbish. So yeah, I don't get it. I liked the fact that he mentioned Oliveira. Like, Khabib Oliveira would be pretty cool. I'd be really into that. Like, that would be great. But like, I just wanted him to go, Khabib's vacated, Conor, Dustin is for the title. I'm like, yes, now that's an announcement. But didn't happen.
No, completely. And obviously, there was a lot of cryptic clues in there of what he thought he was going to do. For me, he said Oliveira 2 or 3 times, whereas he only said the other guys once. So maybe that more kind of leans towards Khabib wanting a fight with Oliveira. Maybe Oliveira comes out, has another fantastic performance against maybe the winner of Hooker versus Chandler, maybe the winner of Dustin versus Connor. You just don't know. It's such a stacked division. We just don't know where it goes. Prath, did you see anything I didn't see, or?
So there's a couple of points I wanted to touch on. I think one of the things that was mentioned, I don't know if it was on the broadcast or after the fact, that Khabib was actually going to be flying to Vegas soon after Fight Island to have yet another meeting with Dana White, another sit-down meeting after all of these events go down this week with Conor and Dustin. So let's hope we get a kind of a little bit more clarity down the road here and seeing what happens here with these next couple of fights. I think the reason why Khabib kind of rates Oliveira as well is because I think of the respect, and they don't want to say it, but the respect that he has for Tony Ferguson. I think watching Oliveira overcome Tony Ferguson like that, that's where he kind of thought, okay, this would be a really good fight for the legacy and things like that. And the way I look at Oliveira is kind of like the new age Tony Ferguson, just chaos and just amazing submissions. So for me now, looking forward, I would love to see Oliveira versus Khabib, because Tony Ferguson versus Khabib was one of my biggest fights that I would have loved to have seen because of their style differences between them. And I feel like Charles really does bring that side of Tony, and he's given that, he's got a little bit, he's a bit younger as well, and he hasn't gone through as many, debilitating knee injuries and things like that Tony's unfortunately gone through in his career. So I would love that fight between him and Oliveira as well. But I got to agree with you guys with just nothing really being decided here, which really sucks, because Khabib is one of those guys as well, like a Dominic Cruz. There was a fighter that we were breaking down that's been off for a long. Oh, Ponzinibbio had been off for a very long time as well. And for him to hold on to the title now, knowing that, having taken that time off before and knowing what it does to a division, it doesn't really set super well with me. And I would love to see some progression. And it's not like Khabib wouldn't immediately be chucked into another title. Even if he was the contender, we know Khabib is the guy. So I think from a fan's perspective, we wanted to see Khabib kind of make a decision either way, whether he were to come back and just to retire. And so I think him kind of sitting in the middle here is really put a little bit of salt, especially with the bit. And as George mentioned, the build up was it was like a pay-per-view was about to happen. They could have just sold a pay-per-view for that little portion of Dana White speaking, not knowing what was about to be said, and he would have sold probably like 500,000 of those things just because people wanted to know. And so for that to be so anticlimactic, man, I was gutted with you guys.
I think as well, with when he was talking about the who he might come back, he'll watch everybody. Let's be honest, right? Khabib, unless it's ridiculous money, he's not fighting Conor. He's beating him. He's not fighting Dustin. He's beating him. He's not fighting Gaethje. He's beating him. He's not fighting Chandler because he'll beat Chandler easily, and he's not fighting Dan Hooker because it'll be easy. He won't find that a challenge. So the only one really is Oliveira in that division. That's the only actual fight that makes any kind of sense. And so instead of going, oh, he'll watch everybody, he's not going to fight people he's already beaten. He's already said that multiple times. Just say that. Why don't you just go behind closed doors? Don't make any kind of announcement and go, look, he's going to come back for one more fight. Apparently he doesn't want the George St. Pierre fight. That one's now dead in the water. And so the only one that makes sense is Charles Oliveira. And so we'll do that, and he gets his chance to go 30-0, and then he can walk away afterwards. It makes no, he's not going to fight anybody else in that division. Nobody. I can't think of anybody.
I'm really gutted that the GSP fight didn't materialize throughout all of this, because that for me is the one that made the most sense out of all of these fights. And like Oliveira again is one of those top guys that I think if anyone put him against Khabib, you'd give him a chance at any kind of rate. But Khabib versus GSP is the biggest question mark out of the entire thing. And I think for them not to even, I'm really surprised as well that Khabib didn't even entertain it anymore. He's kind of done with the entire thing. So we'll see what happens. But I think you see GSP, I think over the last little while as well, has kind of made it known that, if Khabib's about, I'm ready to go. But it's going to take some time to get it done. So yeah, GSP versus Khabib would have been the fight for me, man, if I could have seen any of them.
But that wouldn't, for me, that wouldn't be a very realistic fight to put on for the belt either. If Khabib was holding on to the belt, then he would be holding up the division if he was waiting for GSP for both of these guys to get fighting fit. What weight would it be at? Obviously, he's not a small guy, and he's very, very muscular. Is he going to be able to get down to 155? How long will it take him to get down to 155? I would love to see that fight as an exhibition fight. Get these two guys, but it's very similar to how the Conor Dustin fight came about right, let's have an exhibition fight, nothing to do with the UFC. Let's make a bit of money, give it to your charity. So maybe why not do that? Both of these guys are very charitable for their countries and for the people around them. So why not do a GSP versus Khabib fight? Make it an exhibition fight, pay-per-view, very similar to the Tyson fight recently that we had. Why not do that? I think that would be a fantastic business opportunity for both of these guys. They don't need money, but they could do it for the fans that all want to see it. I think that would be a very, very smart idea. But we are coming to the end of the show, so we are going to be breaking down the Neil Magny versus Michael Chiesa fight in the midweek. It's fantastic for the UK fans. We have a lunchtime fight. We can all have a bit of lunch and then watch these fights throughout the afternoon, which will be fantastic for us. Obviously, for the rest of the world, it's not an amazing fight card, but the rest of the year will probably swing their way. So I doubt they're going to be too upset. George Prath, thank you very much for jumping on the show as always. We'll be back Tuesday night. I believe we're going to chuck the show out for the breakdown for Wednesday, and we'll talk a little bit about the next week's fight as well. And then it's going to be we're just going to be going every week from here. I'm so excited for the rest of the year. I'm so excited for what we have to come and the fights that we have to come. The rest of the coming months are absolutely stacked. There is so much from a fight fan perspective to see. We'll just touch on it now. Actually, what's your favorite fight in the next 3 months, George?
Oh my God.
It's a tough question. It is tough.
That's really thrown me. I tell you what, I'm interested to see. There's two things. I want to see if Ngannou can get over the line against Miocic, and I want to see, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. I'm looking forward to seeing Izzy becoming champ.
Two solid picks. I was literally going to say Ngannou versus Stipe is going to be huge. I'm also looking forward to the back end of the career of Overeem as well. Obviously, he's fighting coming up. I believe he's fighting Volkov, which will be a good stylistic matchup for him as well. And he's obviously been a bit more reserved later on in his career. So I'm super excited about that. But Prath, who do you have?
I got Edward Chimaev.
Of course, but that's a given. I'm talking about some of the other
fights. You took the words right out of my mouth, George. No, but yeah, that for me is a fight that I'm definitely looking forward to in the next little while. I was trying to think as well. I think Izzy Yan is one that really, really stands out for me. I really like Peter Yan versus Sterling. I think Sterling is super underrated for the division, the human backpack. I've always had a real, even from I think one of his first fights he came in, he hit a arm triangle from the bottom. And ever since then, I was like, this guy is elite. And so I'm really interested to see if he can, how he stacks up against Peter Yan, who looks like a destroyer. Let's see if he can last the shots, because one of the things that's really stood out over Aljamain's career is that he doesn't like to be hit. So let's see what happens when he gets hit a lot. Absolutely. And we will break down those fights, and we would break them down beforehand, and then we're going to break them down after as well. We are fans of the game, so it's going to be a super exciting year and future to come. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you very shortly. Thank you.